Welcome back to We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling, where I give you the tools and the skills that you need to love better so you can live better. These days, being a catch has become its own kind of identity. It signals that we are ready for a relationship. We do that by having a successful career, being a responsible adult, having the education, the apartment, and a vocabulary that makes us sound self-aware. It's a performance of readiness and often a reflection of real achievement. But when it comes to love, being impressive isn't the same as being relationship ready. You can have an incredible career, great friends, a gorgeous home, and still struggle with intimacy. Still find yourself shutting down during conflict or blowing things up during conflict. In this episode, Ashtyn and I are pulling back the curtain on what people often miss when they think being a catch should be enough. We're asking, what if the traits that make you exceptional in the rest of your life are actually keeping you disconnected in your romantic one? What if your independence is a disguise for self-protection? What if your standards are a stand-in for vulnerability? Because the goal isn't to look like a catch, it's to become one. So let's jump in.
People don't generally walk around announcing they're a catch. It's something that's signaled or it's picked up on. It's like they check all of these boxes that most people are looking for. And what are those boxes? And why do we assume that those boxes translate into relationship skills or a successful relationship?
We signal that we're a catch by showing that we've got our life together, our career, our education, financial stability, maybe a good therapist on retainer. We are trying to indicate to available people that we have done the work, or at least the visible work. And those things do matter. They speak to responsibility and drive and discipline. Like, they're very important adulting skills. You've heard me batter that over your head over the years. Adulting, we have to adult. And when I say that, I mean me too. We're always trying to do better and be more responsible and get our act together better. But those things don't always speak to emotional intelligence, communication skills, or an ability to tolerate the messiness that comes with relationships, especially intimate ones. We tend to confuse being a good adult with being good in love, and those are not the same thing. Love requires vulnerability. It requires us to unlearn the ways that we self-protect. We have to learn how to tolerate discomfort and sit in it and have the ability to resolve conflict appropriate. And no one gives us like a roadmap for that growing up.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like some people think that a catch is just someone who is killing it in their career, super stable financially, and kind of living their life. But that is definitely not always the case.
I mean, it's certainly a foundation. We're looking for those things because
it's one of the boxes.
It's a lot of the boxes. Like,
Yeah.
we want stability and reliability in a relationship. We want someone who we can rely upon to show up consistently. So somebody who's got, a well-established career they've already shown that they can do that in one area of their life. And arguably, if you can do it in one area of your life, you can do it in other areas of your life, which I hope that people listening are hearing that, to know that if you are killing it in your careers, it's a lot of those same skills that I draw on, which we'll talk about later on, to help fortify and develop your personal life and your intimate relationship.
So why do you think that people who are highly advanced or competent in other areas, like their career, often assume that this will translate into their romantic lives?
I actually don't think that they think that. I actually don't think high achievers have contemplated the need to develop unique skills to make their relationships work. And they don't think about it because we're never taught that relationships are going to require a separate set of skills. So if you're successful in your career, you just assume that you've got the emotional maturity thing handled. But being strategic at work, it doesn't teach you how to stay calm in a fight because people don't fight at work, ideally. And
Ideally.
often, you know what I mean? And if they do, it's usually a pretty measured disagreement.
Hmm.
And if you're in a leadership position, being a leader doesn't mean that you know how to be emotionally vulnerable because when you're in that position, you're rarely required to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And if you're used to getting gold stars for exceeding expectations, it can be a real mind fuck to realize that the traits that made you successful, like having self control, being independent, being a perfectionist, those things can backfire in love. No one teaches us how to be good at relationships. Most of us, truthfully, are just winging it with the tools that we used in childhood. And for a lot of us, those tools aren't serving us in adulthood.
I also feel like the way that you approach your career shouldn't necessarily always be the way that you approach your relationships. I guess in the sense that you want to always keep advancing and learning and growing, but how I operate at work is very different than how I operate in my uh, interpersonal and romantic relationships. And it's funny the juxtaposition between the two. Whenever my partner sees me in work mode, he's like, oh, boss Ashtyn is clocked in. Like it's just a very different disposition because you have to honing in different skills. So I can imagine if you're applying how you are at work to a relationship, you're not getting the same results because they're different. I would be kind of a hard ass in relationships if I approached it the way I do work. I might be like labeled a little high strung, a little anal, and I am really not like that at all in my relationships. It doesn't yield anything, but it does kind of yield things for me at work. So I guess it's kind of like a code switch of sorts that we need to be learning.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about you when I was giving that answer, and I was like, Ashtyn is quite different interpersonally than she is at work.
I have to
I,
be.
I, I can imagine that, where do you think you work harder to tone down the part of you that allows you to succeed in one area of your life versus the other? Is it harder for you to get it up for work, or is it harder for you to tone it down personally? And then we'll switch and I'll answer that question, which I'm regretting asking it already.
I think for me, it's the level of switching off the need to be like in control and almost micromanaging, like when it comes to my relationships. And that's why it's really important for me to be with somebody that is a self-starter, that is, thoughtful and takes initiative, because I don't want to have to keep doing that when I come home or in a relationship. I really like someone who takes the lead because I am always taking the lead. I am always leading. I am always spurring ahead. And it's nice to not have to always do that in a relationship. But I did have to learn to allow myself to reel that back when I was dating because I would immediately start like planning things and doing things and just making sure shit gets done. And I wasn't allowing my partners, which were all men, to be, historically men and allow them to take charge. And I had to really lean back into like my femininity a little bit. And since I've done that, it's allowed me to access higher quality of partner interactions and partners who are able to do those things personally. I'm
I
actually
can
very
imagine.
submissive in my relationship. I'm like, if you want to do this, great. Here are my boundaries. Here's what I don't like. Sure, plan it all.
Submissive is not a word I would normally associate with you, but
Well, I don't, yeah,
I hear what you're saying. I mean, look, when you're making decisions and your brain is squeezing like a bicep every hour
mhm,
of every work day, it is really nice to walk out of work and feel like you've got someone who's a partner and can like make some decisions on behalf of both of you, or at
yeah,
least not lean on you to make their decisions. Like at a bare
right.
minimum, that is what I require in my personal life. Like I can't change diapers in my personal life. I don't have the
No,
energy for it. I'm too tired. We wouldn't
exactly.
eat. If Steph couldn't decide what was for dinner, we would not eat. My solution would be a glass of water and like I'd call it a day. That'd be it.
Yeah, been there. So what about you? I mean, I feel like I kind of already know your answer, but I'll allow you to enlighten everyone else or prove me wrong.
I mean, I'm sure that I'm going to give you the answer you're predicting. It is hard for me to chill personally. As much as I want that in my personal life, I don't know if it's because I've historically struggled to get that or because I am someone that others look to make those decisions, either because they think I'm capable of it or because I'm controlling or a combination of both. But whatever that reputation is that causes the people in my personal life to take a back seat and let me make decisions, it is something that has fed a pattern for me of doing a lot of that in my personal life, and I don't like it. I don't
Mhm.
like it. I don't love it. I don't, it's not always enjoyable for other people. It's hard for me to go from being a boss to being a human being.
Mhm.
It's really hard for me to switch gears, but I do it. And then when I do it and others don't pick up the slack, I complain. So I'm not that easy to please. That's how it goes.
Well, it's hard also to be a boss. Like, I'm not a boss, but I am a manager, and there's a lot of pressure in my job. And I feel sometimes that I'm not always able to give my partner my undivided attention. And it takes me a minute to really unplug from work. Like, he'll be talking, and I'll just be like, you know what? I'm here. I'm present, but I'm listening, but I can't tell you what you're saying to me right now. So yeah, I also think unplugging and stress management is something that I would struggle with, but a lot of people do. A lot of people
Yeah,
do.
they do.
But I'm aware of it. And speaking of that, what is the difference between having that emotional self-awareness and then actually applying it, especially in the heat of conflict?
I mean, there's a big difference, as you can imagine. Emotional self awareness is something that you might get from reading a book or taking a course, listening to this podcast. Lots of people have been trained and certified in CPR. I have been trained and certified in CPR. And I can tell you there is a huge difference between understanding the theory of how to do CPR and actually pumping someone's chest and hearing ribs crack under your hands when you're administering CPR in a medical emergency. Until you've done it IRL, your skills have actually never been pressure tested. So knowing that you shut down when you feel criticized doesn't mean that you know how to manage yourself when you're in that situation so that you don't shut down. Knowing what to do isn't the same as being able to do what you need to do in those situations. Emotional intelligence, when I think of it, my definition of it's not about knowing your patterns. It's about how you act when those patterns get activated. It's one thing to say that you're emotionally available in a calm moment. It's another thing to stay open when you're overwhelmed and triggered. And for me, that's where the real work happens. Not when we're journaling or when we're in therapy or but literally in the heat of the moment, in the
Mhm.
rupture, in the pain of relationships. And a lot of people avoid those moments. They avoid conflicts, so they never actually develop those muscles.
And I feel like that is where these quote unquote people that are catches, that's where they're falling short because on paper, there are checking the boxes. But then when it comes to like seeing things in action, it's just not there. And that detracts a lot from someone being an actual catch. Like you have a pretty cover on the book, but when you open it, not all the chapters are complete, or you're missing a few pages. And I do hear a lot of single people be like, "Oh, like my friend is such a catch. I don't know why they're single." And I'm like, "Well, they're probably lacking some relationship skills or they're not utilizing them."
I'm also going to say that in defense of people who are high achievers, who are single, you know, whatever area of your life you're focusing on the most and putting the most amount of energy in is the area of your life that's going to flourish.
Mhm.
And to be what we consider a catch in air quotes, it takes an awful lot of time. There's like just a certain amount of hours in every day. People, we can't create extra time. And it's not easy to make a living today. And it's certainly not
Yeah.
easy to make an exceptional living or be exceptional as a professional. And that takes a lot of sacrifice. And as a result, other areas of your life are going to be neglected. There's just so much energy in a day. Um, But I want people to remember that when they then strive to balance and give their intimate, their personal life a little bit more attention, it
Hmm.
can certainly, it can certainly develop. And it can be, I've never met anybody who was killing it in their career, who was willing to do the things I suggested that they do and put in the work and put in the time
Hmm.
and fail a number of times, who didn't ultimately get the skills that they'd always hoped that they would have.
Yeah. Well, when you're a high achiever and you're killing it at work, you want to be you're used to being rewarded by doing things. And when you're failing at dating, you're likely not going to want to keep dating and trying. So, I mean, I personally didn't date. I didn't enter a serious relationship until I was literally, I don't know, 22, 23. I didn't date in high school. Like I was so focused on my career that I didn't, and getting, to New York, I didn't give myself any time to make those skills. I didn't want to, spend time doing that. I was busy doing that. But when I did enter the relationships, I then had to learn them and I had to lean in. I had to lean in. It's like everyone's getting their own education at different times, I guess.
And I will say that if you have a good tribe of friends, you are practicing a lot of the skills that are necessary to make an intimate relationship work. Uh,
Yeah, it's
that
true.
said, I'm good at the flip side of that is like nothing is as triggering as an intimate relationship. And nobody is going to analyze you and critique you at the level that your partner will.
And as
And
vulnerable as you need to be. Like
yeah,
I had to allow someone to see me being like grungy, waking up in the morning and just being, the
a
version of
human.
a human. And I had never been ready for anyone to see me besides boss career, Ashton girl, put together, like always doing things. And I was like, oh, I guess I have to be the other version of me too in order to be in a healthy mutual relationship. Got it.
So the skills that you develop to have good friendships and good relationships that are platonic are certainly applicable in your intimate relationships. And also, nothing will be as triggering to any of us as
Yeah.
an intimate partner.
So, what makes romantic relationships uniquely challenging for high achieving people or people who, are a catch on paper?
High achievers are people who are used to control. They're used to outcomes that reflect their effort. If they work hard, they get results. But relationships, as you know, they don't necessarily work that way because they involve two people who have a lot of historical baggage that both partners can be blithely unaware of. You can't spreadsheet your way through that stuff. I mean, I have definitely tried. I- Even with my education and training, and I can do it with clients, but you can't do it on your own. And for high achievers, that is really maddening because they're used to excelling. So when a relationship doesn't work, they have a tendency to blame themselves or blame the person, which will lead to a partial answer. But the real deep answer lives in the relational dynamics. That's the Venn diagram of the relationship. The ways in which the two of you influence what happens between you, meaning not you, Ashton, not your boyfriend, but the space that the two of you overlap in. How do you provoke him? How does he provoke you? So, questions to ask yourself, which most people would never ask themselves. We'd be looking for more of a binary answer if we had a fight with our partner. Deeper questions to ask yourself might be, what am I doing that is causing my partner to go quiet? Or how am I contributing to this situation escalating? Also, high achievers often mistake emotional suppression for emotional management skills. They can be so practiced at powering through discomfort that
Mhm.
they don't even realize how cut off they either are or appear to be, both from themselves and from others. So,
Mhm.
if you're in a relationship with a high achiever and you're like melting down either on the inside or visibly in front of your partner, and they're just there looking grounded, you don't always know how connected they are to what's going on inside of them, or if they're just so accustomed to compartmentalizing their emotions so that they can do the task at hand, which is how they became successful, or if they are really well managed emotionally. And that can be tricky to tease out. So, all of those things can be true.
I want to also kind of shed light on the fact that this is a different experience, I will say, for women who are high achieving women, especially when they're hetero and they're dating men. Because if they're not dating a man who is on the same level of high achieving as them, or they find themselves with insecure men, a lot of men are are insecure. They feel jealous or they have some kind of reaction to a powerful woman. And I don't think that men have to deal with that the way that women do. Men are probably just more concerned about women being with them for the wrong reasons or whatever. But I mean, can you speak to specifically, do you think that for women who are high achievers, there's a little bit more of an obstacle there, just kind of given how society has structured success for genders and gender roles?
I mean, I can. I was raised by a mom who was an entrepreneur in an era where women were, lucky enough to be able to work and get a job because my mother was part of the silent generation, so above boomers, for those of you way young. And it was not uncommon. Most of my friends' parents, the moms did not work growing up. Moms stayed at home, dads worked. In my house, it was flipped. My stepfather stayed at home and my mother went to work. And she would tell me repeatedly as a child, Darce, it's really hard for dad to tolerate. She would excuse a lot of his really bad behaviors and say that she emasculated him through her success. Um, and I would argue, had he not been an under worker and an underachiever, she probably would have been happy to take her foot off the gas.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does that look like today? It looks like a woman having to manage her male partner's feelings around her success and having to be hyper attuned to how her achievements are impacting them. And I know that women often will struggle with feeling like they have to dial down their
Mm-hmm.
achievements, or if they haven't found a man that's at least as successful as them, if not more successful, there's an inequity and an imbalance in the masculine feminine energy that is hard to make harmonize.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
what is your experience with that?
No, I mean, I think that you hit it on the head. I mean, I think that it also depends on, the industries that you work in. I've always worked in corporate, like 9 to 5, like pretty hardcore. I've had partners who worked in finance. I had partners who worked in retail. And, kind of everywhere in between. And I think that it really bothered some partners, A, like how often I worked, or B, at certain times when I was really doing well and they weren't. And they actually would like come to me for like help with work. And, like I was proofreading an email once and I was like, listen, I'm happy to help you, but I think it definitely took a toll in the insecurity of this person that I was dating at the time because they were already insecure. And I think
Mhm.
that this was just like another layer of icing on the cake. And yeah, I mean, I think I come across as intimidating sometimes to men if they meet me in the workplace, especially when I was younger, because I was laser focused on that. And I think it made me like, not that men didn't want to date me for that reason, but they admired me, but they weren't as interested in pursuing me romantically, I guess, because A, I was so busy, and B, I was no bullshit. I don't think I've ever like had a guy be like directly a baby about it. I think it's more in the undertones.
I was just going to say it's all in the subtext because
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
imagine the ego strength that somebody would need to say to their partner, your career success makes me feel intimidated?
Right.
Um, I mean
Right.
that's a shot in the dark. I can't imagine too many people doing that. So when I work with a lot of the people I work with are very high achieving women, and they do tend to be dating partners who are either just as high achieving if they're straight, and if they're gay, it doesn't matter because as long as, one of them takes on different responsibilities.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, honestly, I've achieved a lot. If my partner wants to retire me so I can pursue a passion project and high achieve at that, I will happily let them step up to the plate. I no longer have any qualms about that. I can high
I
achieve in many other ways.
Beautiful. Come on full time to the podcast. That'd be great.
That would be great. If anyone wants to make that happen, we can drop a Venmo link in the show notes this time.
You're so silly.
Full-time entertainers.
Support for this episode comes from Mindful Care. The world is heavy right now. Politics, money, relationships, it's a lot. If you're feeling anxious, burnt out, or like you're white-knuckling your way through the day, you're not alone. Mindful Care offers same-day access to licensed clinicians, real help, personalized plans, most insurance accepted. And for my listeners, use code Dr. Darcy to unlock a free group therapy session because you don't have to figure it out all alone. Call 516-505-7200 or visit mindful.care today.
So an excuse I hear from a lot of people that I know that are high achievers or, a catch, this is an excuse and maybe a form of avoidance, is that they have high standards. Like they haven't found someone because they have high standards. In what ways? Well, A, do you think that's a socially acceptable reason? Or do you think it's just a cover-up?
I think it's complicated, and I think that it can at times be a bit of a smokescreen. It is one of the few forms of avoidance that actually gets socially rewarded. People will just say, I just haven't found the right person.
Right.
And people tend not to question it. But sometimes having high standards is really just fear. It's fear of wasting time, fear of settling, fear of getting hurt again. So we swipe left because they didn't hit every bullet on our list. Or maybe we end up in a relationship where there's friction and we wind up staying in a relationship beyond the expiration date because we imagine that finding a new partner is going to be a miserable process. It's not that standards are bad. They're essential. It's really important when I first start working with someone that they be able to articulate what their likes and dislikes are and what their deal breakers and must-haves are. But when your standards are so rigid that they stop you from getting closer to your goal, then I don't think we're talking about standards anymore. I think we're often talking about armor.
No, I agree. I'm only speaking from the single people that I know when they talk about their high standards, and it's mostly women. Their standards are like, I want him to make a certain amount of money. I want him to live alone, have his own apartment, want kids, like love kids, be 6 foot tall, well-dressed, funny, not balding, no receding hairline. And I'm like, okay.
What is a lot of money? What is enough money? I'm curious. New York City, 2025. What is enough money? What's a dollar amount they want?
I don't know. I mean, I know some girls who are like down to the salary. They're like, I want them within this range. I want them making over 200 to 400K a year at the minimum, And because they want a future lifestyle. And that is the first block to even getting to a relationship point. But when you are basing the entry point for all of your relationships with men on that, it's not, it's not successful based on what I've seen, truly. And they think that because they have that huge box ticked off, surely everything else will be okay. Maybe there's a few flags, but he's financially stable and he has a great apartment, or maybe he comes from money, or he has a great family. Like, not that does a partner make in entirety.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? It's important, but...
Well, here I'm going to sound like a douche, but 200 to 400 in New York City for a man of a certain, or anyone of a certain age, like that's middle class. That is
Well, in
middle
New York,
class.
in New
Yeah, I
York.
mean, it's different. It's different here. Like that is literally, that just means you can Uber when you need to, you can order in when you need to, that you can get your dry cleaning done, you can take a couple vacations a year. You are not living large on that income.
But there's also criteria. So here's what also gets me about this is that there are people who make that money and they choose to live a lifestyle that does not reflect that. And a lot of women specifically are not okay with that. So if your partner is making a ton of money but lives in a shitty apartment in Hell's Kitchen,
Yeah.
it's all about like the security and the lifestyle and like wanting to do things. I personally like have never dated for that incentive. It's always nice, but I also feel like, and this is a mass generalization, it's just based on experience, but that type of man is a certain archetype. I'll say it here, it's the finance bros of the world. Um,
Ooh, ooh,
and
go
they're not
on.
all bad. They're not all
No, they're
bad.
not. No, they're
They're not.
not. I
And I
work with
know they're
some of
not.
them.
And that's why I believe that they're not all bad. Um, or capable, I want to say, capable of becoming more evolved human beings. Essentially, I feel like that is like the archetype of what a lot of girls like. They kind of want that long term, or they want someone who is achieving on that level of achievement.
I hear you.
Um,
And I hear them. I get it all.
yeah. And then for men, I mean, we won't even go. We could do a whole episode about what men want for women, and it has nothing to do with how much money they make. It has everything to do with what they look like. But again, we can save that for another episode
It is an upcoming episode.
because that's their high standards. When a man says
Yeah.
he has high standards, more often than not, he means I want a 10. I won't take anyone below an 8.5 or whatever. Someone who's actually evolved when they say they have high standards, like means they want someone who is emotionally intelligent, likely cultured, empathetic. Um, so I think that the high standards conversation, it's been like socially accepted and brushed aside when it could mean someone who actually has high standards, they could be misconstrued as like, oh, I know what you mean. I know what you mean by high standards, but they could be like, no, I do actually have high standards. Just
Well, I
not
don't think
what.
people walk into a room announcing my standards are high. I mean, or maybe I just don't work with people who act like that. I would
No.
not
Well,
work with, that would be the first beating they would get from me would be like, you never walk into a room and people don't do that. People don't do that, but they signal, they virtue signal. They try to signal in other ways. Listen, I'm sorry, if you can't find a way to at least signal without announcing that you're a catch, I got news for you. You're not a fucking catch.
yeah.
There's a deficiency there. You have to
Yeah.
be able to at least virtue signal that you're a catch if you truly are a catch.
Yeah. You have to walk the walk. So if someone already knows that they've built an incredible life, they have everything going for them, but they still want more in love, or they're lacking love, what's the first shift that they should make?
I mean, those are generally my clients. They've either built a very successful career or they're in the process of building one. And when you do that, it takes a level of focus and sacrifice, as I said before, that often causes a deficit in other areas of your life, your romantic life being the primary one. And that's okay. Like I said, there's only so many hours in a day. And I want people to hear that it's never too late to bridge that gap. So you start by imagining that you already have a partner and ask yourself these questions. You have an imaginary partner. You ask yourself, can I explain to them what my triggers are? Can I connect those triggers to my childhood history so that they can understand why this is a trigger for me? And can I tell them what I need when I'm triggered so that I don't act out in historical ways? Now, most people aren't going to be able to answer those questions, and that's okay. There are many therapists who can walk you through that. Each of those questions can easily become a therapy goal, and you work methodically through each of them. But you need to find a therapist who's going to start your work by conducting an assessment, which we're all trained to do and almost none of us do. Because and I'm talking to therapists here, you cannot help someone make sense of their childhood history if you expect those stories to unfold organically in therapy, because the person's going to be on your couch for years before you get a full picture of what their history is. So instead, we got this tool called an assessment, which we're all trained to do, and it is a boring process, takes 2 to 3 hours. But at the end of it, I've got my clients' major life events outlined. So they're not filling me in for years on their history. I get that out of the way before the first session. And once that's out of the way, the therapist needs to know how to identify your relationship triggers. What are the things that cause you to go from 0 to an 8, 9, or 10 on a discomfort scale? And then what are the behaviors you engage in when you get to an 8, 9, or 10? Are you somebody who's like fantasizing about ending the relationship? Are you somebody who leans into a fight, needs to resolve it, acts like a rabid animal trapped in a bag when they're upset? Or are you somebody who shuts down and becomes like a husk of a human being? There's nothing left in you. You have to know that. Once the therapist has that information, they've got to then begin teaching you how to manage yourself so that you can handle triggers in ways that serve you. And I guess that's a very long way of answering the question,
Well,
what's the first shift someone has to make?
what
I,
if they're not in therapy? Like, what is
you,
a
you,
very small shift that they could do to like
you can't make a
start?
very small, this is very hard work. You cannot make a very small, start by becoming aware of what you need.
There,
So
there.
right there, well, that was the first part of my answer. The first part of my answer was start by asking yourself, can I answer these questions? Can I explain to a partner, a future partner, an imaginary partner, what my triggers are, how they relate to my childhood, and what I need from them when I'm triggered? You cannot be in an adult relationship if you can't do those three things.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, then, you wind up, if you can't guide your partner, then how do you expect your partner to be able to navigate you in moments like that? You're like two clueless human beings walking in the dark. It's impossible. You can't fix a problem if you don't know you have a problem. So if you're just this great on paper, great on LinkedIn person who knows in her soul that she is a catch and is single and doesn't want to be, you first start by asking yourself, can I help a brand new partner, an imaginary partner, navigate me when I'm triggered? Now, some people may never have been in a relationship and they
Mm-hmm.
may not even know what their triggers are.
Right.
So then you definitely want to have, you know, you
Try
definitely
to get into a relationship.
get into a
You have to
relationship
learn
with
by
two
doing.
people, right? But with two people, you need the
Yeah.
therapist at the same time so that when you're getting triggered by the partner, you don't blow up that relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be my advice to someone. You know, otherwise, how can you expect anybody to fill in gaps that you don't know yourself?
Well, no, I know. It's like you hear that people. It's like I feel like people who are like, whoa, I still haven't found that yet. I still want love. Their solution is to keep swiping or to just keep going on massive amounts of dates.
If you cannot walk your partner through, this is what it looks like when I have a disagreement with someone. This is what it looks like when I'm super triggered. This is, you need some life experience to be able to guide a partner maturely through how to resolve disagreements because everybody does it differently. And your partner is going to need a guide for that. It's like you've just traveled to a foreign country or they've just traveled to a
Mhm.
foreign country, and you need to be able to show them around the terrain of that country. And if you don't even know how to do that for yourself, then you got two people who haven't got a clue. And that is just a recipe for disaster.
We've spent a lot of time on this episode talking about high achievers and how that relates to, a career.
Mhm.
What about the other high achievers out there that are catches? What do those people look like? Can we kind of shed some light on them and share why this also applies to them?
Absolutely. And when I talk about high achievers, I'm not talking about someone who's killing it in their career and has no one in their life. I don't consider that to be a high achiever. When we mention high achievers, like, look, none of us can control who we're biologically related to or who we're raised with. So our family, I never count a family against someone that I'm in front of because they had no choice about who their
Right.
family is. When somebody's a high achiever, I think of them as being healthy. I think about them as taking
Mm,
care of themselves, about having the ability to make sure that they're in good shape, especially the younger you are. There is no excuse. There is no excuse to not be in shape when you're young. And I'm talking about somebody who has fulfilling friendships or a mentor, has other people in their lives, has some relationships in their lives. If all you are is wealthy, I don't consider that a high achiever. I don't consider that a catch. And maybe that's the problem that the
mm,
person's having.
I think so. On that note, you can still not be super wealthy and be a catch. Do you hear that, guys? Men especially. You can still be a great catch and get an amazing partner, even if you're not making millions of dollars a year or what you think that you should be making. It's more important about who you are as a person and your relationship
Mhm.
skills
Yeah.
versus what's on your LinkedIn or your W-2.
There you,
Well, yeah, you get it.
there you go,
Yeah, your
Ashton.
tax return.
All right, Ashton, you want to read us out?
We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. Editing and sound engineering by Bart McGow. Our theme music is by Trending Music. Special thanks to Amanda Cristiani and Robin Gengin. Recognize yourself in this episode? Share with a friend who's just as much of a catch as you are. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode packed with the relationship, dating, and mental health hacks you've come to expect. References, as always, are linked in the show notes.
Thanks, Ashton.
Thank you.